So I wanted to say something about Michael Savage and political parties and talk radio and different strategies of approaching pro-democracy or politics in general. I'm going to offer two strategies that I've seen a lot of times, and I want to propose a third. One strategy is, let's call it the Lieberman strategy. Let's call it the Mike Schaffler strategy. You might not have heard of him before. And this is legislatively valid. I'm not saying morally valid, I'm saying progressively valid, but arithmetically valid. That if you have a legislative chamber, call it a Senate of 100 people, call it a state house of 60 people, and therefore you need 31 votes to get most things done. Those votes between 25 and 35, those votes that are harder to count, those votes that might go either way, end up having lots of power. When Lieberman said center, when Paul Wellstone said center out, he meant the center of people's lives. When Joe Lieberman meant center out, he meant whatever that 31st vote wants. And if I can position myself to be that 31st vote versus that 30th versus that 29th vote in a 60-person chamber, or that 49th vote or a 50th vote or 51st vote in a U.S. Senate chamber, a little bit different dynamic because of the filibuster, it's been watered down, by the way, then that center group can in fact be the leadership group. Not the group's official leadership, but they can go make deals to, shut down a shutdown, for example. That's one strategy that we see a lot and hear about a lot. Let me offer a second strategy that we see, and that is, let us think of the further end of, if it's a spectrum, and I try to, in my own mind, rage against the idea that politics is a spectrum because I think it's false. I think it's a human construct. I don't think that's how it is. But when we end up counting votes in a legislative chamber, it very often resembles that. We count votes even when it comes to an election of a person. It resembles a little bit that. And I understand why that idea, albeit a self-fulfilling prophecy, ends up fulfilling a little bit. That we will advocate for the purity of our cause and go after those who don't have that degree of purity and go really after enemies. And I will use an example of Michael Savage. So Michael Savage was different than legislative strategy, media strategy. I would listen to him and just be horrified. And Thom was talking about it and said, that guy's really gifted and he's a really talented guy. He was not agreeing with his politics, to be very, very clear. And he would talk about how you'd tell a story and tell a story within the story and the story within the story, and it showed what a radio expert he was. But he would just be blistering, be the kind of thing that I realized, man, if I saw that guy on the street, I would just assume he hated me. That if I were on the street bleeding, he would step over me or cut me again. That he was opposed to things that I thought were really important and also opposed to me. But if you can get your enemies scared enough or weak enough or marginalized enough, then you can do that kind of rhetorical politics or politics in general. And if you can get other people scared of being lumped in with those folks, you can bring people in to your your angry core team. And you're never really, and if you're Michael Savage, you were never really aiming for 51% of the people. What he knew as a radio strategist, I'm not a radio strategist, I should probably be better at that. But he knew as a radio strategist, he didn't need 51% of the people. He didn't need to govern. Rush Limbaugh said this, is that I am not judged by the result of elections, I'm judged by the number of listeners I get. And if you get like 10% of people listening to you, that's a lot. And so he'd go after that core, hard core, not just of values or purity, but of anger, of venality, of how much they were united in their hatred of their political adversary. And that's another strategy. Maybe that's strategy 2 and strategy 2.1 or 2.5, or maybe even 2 and 3, but I'm calling it a second. It's like, here is the core of the virtuous or the core of the most angry, the core of the you name it, and then try to have that radiate out a little bit, but some of what you're trying to do is sell books. and maybe scare some other people, or at least unite some of your own people. Maybe you even do, and Donald Trump is sort of an example of that second strategy, where he said, all right, here's the deal. I might not be your kind of guy. I might not believe in your God. I've never read that Bible, but I will pretend to have done that. And you will be willing to believe that, to go along with that pretending, because I hate your enemy as much as you do, and I will help you hate them and help you beat them. And because of that, you don't care who I sexually assaulted. You don't care my personal moral values. You don't care about my corruption. You don't care about me tearing down the East Wing of the White House. You don't care about my relationships with pedophiles, because I hate your enemy as much as you hate your enemy. That's another strategy. I want to offer a third one. Because I don't really like either of those strategies very much. The first one, they both feel morally bankrupt. They also feel like they have long-term negative implications. That first strategy, because if all you're doing is just sticking your finger in the wind and figuring out where the middle is, that middle can continue to move, and it moves you along. And your beliefs and your, even just thinking strategically, your rhetorical architecture has to continue to change. Your values have to continue to change if you had them in the first place. It can be dizzying. I have talked to multiple people. I remember the guy who was member of Congress in Oregon, who told the same story as a state senator, just slightly different. He said, and it was Congressman Weaver, and he said, when I was elected, I was elected as a liberal Democrat. He ended up running as a Green Party member for Secretary of State. He said, political spectrum has moved. I haven't changed. I still think what I think before, but I can't find a coalition that, that has the center of power that agrees with me. I think he fits in. I think Weaver, even then, fit in with a lot of more Democrats than he gave some credit for, but too little of the leadership as he saw it. Another guy was a guy named Cliff Trow. Cliff Trow was elected. It is him telling me. I wasn't asking him about it. He just told me about it. He said, Jeff, when I was elected to the state Senate, and he was a college professor, as I recall, and wonderful, wonderful guy. I was elected as a moderate. People saw me as maybe a crossover vote. I was elected as a moderate. By the time I retired, I was viewed as one of the most liberal members of the state Senate. He said, Jeff, not only my values didn't change, my positions didn't change, my politics didn't change. Just, I was a stick on the beach, and the water level changed. The tide shifted. They were successful in shifting that tide. And that first strategy, that Lieberman strategy, just moves with the tide and invites other people to move that tide. Second strategy I don't like, but the second strategy at least can move the tide. At least it can stay in the sand. At least it can be firm, maybe persuade others. It's at least not mealy-mouthed. The reason I don't like that one is not just because it's mean, but because its long-term implications are, how do we actually govern in a country? Not just trying to get like Trump's thing of like, here's how you get like 45% of support from the people, but with voter suppression and with scaring other folks about their enemy and maybe getting a third-party candidate or two, then maybe I can eke out a victory. And even those moderates will stay with me because I'll threaten them in primaries and with enough media support. And like, yeah, I get that. And it's allowed him to be elected president. But what's the long-term implication? The long-term implications, you got people already saying, what would a Truth and Reconciliation Commission look like? So after this break, I want to offer a third strategy, a third approach that I'm working on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll also have your calls after this. It's Anything Goes Friday. What's going right now is some stuff that's been bubbling up all week.